All right, we are live for the midday Mike and Mario show. Excited to be back for another Friday edition, the 14th of the month of January. How you doing, Mario?
I'm doing well, Mike, and you?
I am not bad at all. Excited to connect again. Lots of things to recap over this past week, as well as stuff to talk about for the weeks and days ahead. And so, how do you want us to kick this episode off, my friend?
Maybe we could look a little bit about some stories that are coming out,
Okay.
uh, the global supply chain. I
Mm,
think there was a story from Zero Hedge, and Zero Hedge, a lot of times they're ahead of the curve,
yeah,
while the mainstream just focuses on the short term that everything is great.
yeah.
But they're talking about the fact that China has like a zero COVID zero policy. And what does that mean? Well, that means that they will lock down a city of 10 million people
Yeah,
just because they've had two cases, let's say.
yeah.
And I think in a way that could be a good thing because they stop the spread of
Hmm.
whatever they want. That's what we're told, of course. I know a lot
Right,
of people don't buy into this, but
right.
the advantage, according to some of the banks that wrote these analysis, the banks that, of course, wanting to force their workers to have the pass, they're saying that paradoxically it could help
Hmm.
because even though you could have short term disruptions to the supply chain because they might lock a city for a week or so. In the
Yeah.
longer term, it could be a good thing. And I
No,
think we
but do you
also,
believe that though? But do you believe that? Because if that's their recommendations and suggestions, I'm like, oh, okay, what's the real agenda behind that? Because nothing about
yeah, I
locking things
know.
down, slowing people
Our,
down, making them do
yeah,
use passcodes and passports to me sounds
and
beneficial for us, but more so
mm,
for their
and
agenda.
even though it feels like in the last year or 18 months, there's a lot of China bashing that, the CCP and the West
Uh-huh.
against the West. I'm not even sure. Maybe, the people in charge here, the globals, they're working together with China. So
Hmm.
you don't really know. But
Yeah.
I just think this global supply chain problem
Yeah.
is not over. And we also saw the biggest container ship company, they're a Danish company called Maersk.
Yeah. Let me
They're
put it on the
warning
screen real
that
quick.
the beginning of the year, nothing is improved, especially between the US and China.
Yeah.
There you go. So I think, yeah, and we've just seen some data come out today from the U.S.
Hmm.
Retail sales. They came out down 2%
Yeah.
for almost down 2% for December. They were expected to go up, and we saw industrial production also lower than expected.
Yeah.
So it's weird. The Federal Reserve made a mistake saying that inflation was transitory, and I think they might be making a big mistake saying that they're going to raise rates 4 times this year, or maybe they know there's something coming, a crisis, and
Hmm.
they need to raise rates quickly. And why would that be? Well, because if rates are at zero, you can't really cut unless you go into negative territory. And I think the dollar being the reserve currency
Yeah.
for the major reserve currency, a negative rate will be disastrous. So if they could get rates quickly up to one,
Hmm.
and then a crisis hits, they'll be able to cut it again to zero, and that might help. It
Yeah.
sounds perverse, but uh, in a way, it makes maybe sense.
Yeah. Now, before we move forward, let me backtrack a little bit because you were in when you were just explaining about the whole Chinese situation and their involvement. Something came to mind. I just grabbed it real quick, and it's an article fresh out today about how Chinese President Xi Jinping to address Davos agenda in 2022. So I saw this yesterday about Xi and Klaus Schwab connecting for a World Economic Forum chat, and when I saw that, I'm thinking like, okay, so we were always led to believe that it's the West versus the East, the globalist agenda. They're trying to, exclude China and disrupt their One Belt, One Road initiative. So when I see stuff like this, kind of, to me, it further connects the dots as to how there's a possibility, a very likelihood that they're, of course, all working together to accomplish some type of sinister objective. But yet, when you got
Yeah,
Xi Jinping and Klaus Schwab connecting, that doesn't sound like they're really they're against each other.
yeah, I think it's all these. this is all like theater to
Yeah.
divide us, and to also help the Chinese, because maybe in China they're talking about the West being bad,
Mhm.
and here we talk about them being bad, and we put sanctions on Chinese politicians or
Mhm.
sanctions on Russians. But it's funny because they don't put any sanctions on Australian politicians,
Right.
because if there was a China Open, tennis Open, that was a Grand Slam event, and they
Yeah.
stopped people from the West going there because they could say, "Oh, your vaccine is not good enough." They would be highly criticized, but as it's Australia, it seems to be okay to
Yeah,
stop.
and that's so yeah, that's a whole other can of worms there.
But
So
it's
let's talk
interesting.
about
The whenever it's like with Kazakhstan, uh, in the last 2 weeks or so, a lot of people are saying, "Oh, it's George Soros trying to foment a revolt or call a revolution." But
yeah.
then I looked into Kazakhstan a bit deeper, and I
Mhm.
spoke about that in my live stream on Sunday. The Kazakhstan is like they're really in bed with the World Economic Forum.
Yeah.
They're really into the green agenda. So you
Yeah.
kind of wonder whether these things are just like distractions to keep us from looking at the
It's
real
certain different
problem, which is Klaus Schwab and the
right.
central banks. Those are the real problems.
Right, and of course, what we're witnessing is I think everything is tiered. Like on the surface, we're being distracted with the health agenda, and they've been honest enough to tell us up front why they're doing this. They're trying to reshape the face of humanity politically, monetarily. And I was even watching the World Economics Forum most recent video talking about what is it something about capitalism, some equally shared capitalism, or some new words they're
That
using to try to
that's communism, isn't it? Equally
right,
shared.
but they're trying to paint it, with it equalize or equally trying to make it, the whole equal, everybody will be equal capitalism, something like that. But, and they're all working together to accomplish this goal. And of course, the underworkings of it is, the introduction of CBDCs, no mention of gold and silver in any kind of financial, news syndicates, because that's not acceptable. You got your mainstream pundits, Michael Saylors and Kathy Woods out there talking about, everything is good, everything's great, get Bitcoin and there's no tech bubble. So there's so many distractions in other places. But the Federal Reserve, which is the war reserve currency, they're tightening into a very weak environment. And obviously
Mm.
confidence is winding down. And now it's a matter of what? Because we got all these banks, talking about, I saw something about JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon talking about the possibility of more than 4 hikes this year. And I'm thinking, like, why are they trying to sell the world that they're going to be able to actually do this? What are they distracting us from in the meantime? So,
Well,
uh,
I think they want to get a few rate hikes because they know something bad is coming,
yeah,
so they can cut rates a few times.
that's it right there.
uh,
Stakeholder capitalism.
Yeah, that's right. Stakeholder capital. It's like ridiculous because we don't even. I was listening today to an old interview Alex Jones did with Aaron Russo, who
Mhm.
was the director. He was the guy who made the film Trading Places with Eddie Murphy, which is a classic.
Yeah,
And he did an interview with Alex Jones in '07, and
yeah,
he
I put
said,
this up there.
and he's very much against the Federal Reserve. He died,
Mhm.
unfortunately, in '07. He was ill,
Yeah,
and he said, we don't have capitalism because central banking is one of the planks of the Communist Manifesto,
mhm.
and the graduated income tax is also part of the Communist Manifesto. So yeah, as Aaron Russo said, we don't have a capitalism. We have socialism or communism,
Mhm.
and people might say, well, Wall Street is not socialist or capitalist. Well, they are. The globalists.
Yeah,
They just want a few people in charge with all the wealth, and that's how it was during the Soviet Union. You had the people close to the Communist Party that had all the wealth. The only people who could travel and buy things at foreign shops in Moscow, for
mhm.
example, with hard currency were the party members, and maybe athletes that were important, people that were important for the regime. A little bit like now. I mean, I saw late last year, Jamie Dimon traveled to Hong Kong
Mhm.
for some kind of meeting, uh,
Exempt
and
from everything.
he was exempt from quarantining for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And why is that? Well, because he's got the KMA pass,
Mhm.
and that's what actually Aaron Russo, who became friends with Nicholas Rockefeller.
Mhm.
Nicholas Rockefeller approached him because he wanted to recruit him away from the path that he was taking in
Yeah.
exposing the New World Order. And
Yeah.
Nicholas Rockefeller said, all of you, everyone's going to have a chip, and you all your money is going to be in that chip or QR code. At the time, it was called a chip.
Mhm.
And he said, but the people at the top, like Jamie Dimon, he didn't say Jamie Dimon, but the elite, they'll have a KMA pass. And what is a KMA pass? Well, it's a kiss my ass pass. So if you show your pass to the police
Yeah.
or someone, and they'll see that, oh, you KMA, you just let him through, or
Yeah.
her.
Yeah.
But one encouraging thing, though, that I'm seeing here in the UK, I don't know if it's because we have a tradition different than in continental Europe of common law
Mhm.
and individual freedom, but I see that they're going to scrap. It says here an article from the Daily Mail that came out today. England
Mhm.
will scrap COVID passes and work from home at the end of the month because they're
Mm.
hard to justify now that Omicron is subsiding. With masks on trains and shops, the only curb left. But I can tell you, here now, if you don't wear a mask, they don't ask any questions because it's another, uh, sorry, it's another part of common law. Uh,
Mhm.
you've heard the term probably in the movie when they arrest someone and they say, "Oh, you have the right to remain silent, anything
Right.
you say." But that's not just if you were arrested because they suspect you've committed a crime. That's
Mhm.
any time. So in under common law, you
Yeah.
don't have to say anything. So you can use that if they ask you, "What's your where's your COVID pass?" And you say, "I'm sorry, I don't want to talk about my private health
Yeah.
situation, and I'm going to be quiet about that." So I think things could be changing here. Maybe I'm too optimistic, but who knows? We're starting to see politicians get in trouble here with all their parties. They're being exposed. It's all
Yeah.
being leaked that they were partying during lockdowns.
Yeah, and also just this week itself, I must admit, I was caught up by surprise yesterday when the Supreme Court, the fact that they were willing to hear arguments so soon rather than kicking the can down the road and letting things, unfold the way that, the globalists would prefer that they do with the mandating of, on a private sector. But the fact they came out and decided to say that it is not within OSHA's authority to be able to enforce stuff like that threw me for a loop. Then I dived in further and saw that I guess three of the more conservative Supreme Justices expressed their opinion as to why OSHA was out of line. And then I think three of the extremely liberal individuals said that the Supreme Court was out of line for even interpreting the fact that OSHA was not able to do that because it's dealing with health and the medical side. And the Supreme Court is not. That's not our jurisdiction. We shouldn't have saw that. So there's some beef between the Supreme Courts, which I guess that's good because it's a win for the people as of now. But the Medicare side of things is still being enforced, and of course they're going to find new ways to try to impose sanctions or not sanctions, but make it very onerous on people financially with all the Medicare, Medicaid, and all the government programs by mandating stuff. So we'll see. But I want to acknowledge the super chat from Nature Knows. Appreciate you, my friend. Thank you for the blessing to the live stream. And then
Oh,
also,
did you see that dog's wearing a mask on his
let me
thumbnail?
see here.
What was that, cat? A cat?
Yeah. And speaking of which, more of the pushback, I see that I think Tori. Let me see here. I saw something yesterday about. Let me see if I can find it. But more countries now are pushing back now. So I think Mexico, as of yesterday, removed all restrictions, anything to do with the agenda, which was surprising because they didn't have many anyway. So I wonder why. But more nations appear to be, because they're being
Mm.
impacted with their tourism because nobody's
It's
traveling like that anymore. So
It's strange that it seems to only be Australia and New Zealand that are holding on.
Right, strong,
I
and it's
saw, yeah, I saw that, the premier of Western Australia, which is one of
mhm,
the Australian states, uh, I think he's passed new rules that,
mhm,
if you're not, double or fully vaccinated,
right, they changed the wording to it
whatever
now.
that, yeah, whatever that's gonna be, you won't be able to go to bottle shops, which are liquor stores. You won't be able to go to hospital.
Mhm,
I mean, they're getting really draconian over there. I heard, in New Zealand, they're very draconian, even though they've found 1 or 2 cases in the whole country.
right,
So, I don't know what's going on, and, that's a little bit worrying as well
mhm,
because it looks like they could be losing a lot of, I
right,
mean, this whole, COVID thing could be, unraveling. We saw, I think it was it earlier this week in the States that, Pfizer was gonna have 75 years to publish
to
all the
reveal,
data
yeah,
on the, but now it's only gonna be 8 months. It was a court
right,
that decided that. They might
right,
appeal, but, that's probably a worry as well
right.
for that
And then speaking of which,
company.
there's so much pressure now on Anthony Fauci because everybody's
Oh,
more than convinced that he's a liar and he's been done more harm than good. So there's more of that push to remove Fauci.
well,
I think last summer, Marjorie Green came out with the Fire Fauci Act, but then just as of yesterday or so, there's a new act type of thing that's starting to form, exposing more how Fauci is just not operating in the best
yeah.
interest of the
Did you
people. What was that?
Did you see, earlier this week, I think Project Veritas came out with
Mm,
some damning,
right.
uh, DARPA,
Right,
US military information about Dr. Fauci and gain of function.
right.
You probably won't see that in this, mainstream media. We haven't seen it here in the mainstream media, but these things get out.
Mhm,
And I think, a lot of people in, law enforcement and, in the military, they're
mhm.
looking at that and they're saying to themselves, yeah, the mainstream media is not reporting this, but this is very serious.
Right. Very true. Very true. And speaking of which, I think let me bring this up here about the tennis. Was Djokovic, if I'm not saying that crazy, how his visa was canceled again, and now it says he's in limbo 2 days ahead of the Australian Open. And I think that by him getting that special pass put a lot of shine a lot of bad negative light on Australia's authoritarian regime takeover because people were saying that this right here is a sign that if you stand your grounds and contest, then they'll have to give in, and he's a primary example of that example. But it looks like they're deciding to go against that. So this is more of how Australia is really
Yeah,
looking to cause
he
issues.
looks like he's going to be in this prison for over the weekend
Yeah.
while, his lawyers and the government, I think he might appeal, and I heard something that he could appeal, and
Mhm.
while he's on appeal, he could be playing, and then if he wins and finishes, he might be arrested after that or have to leave straight away. It's just
Yeah.
crazy. I
Right.
think they're trying to make an example of him.
Yeah.
Because they want everyone to be, to have that thing on their arm,
Right.
unfortunately.
Right. Speaking of which, Ignata, here's a Chris question from Chris. Appreciate you, my friend. Says, with inflation raging and probably going higher, there's a good chance it could knock the economy into a recession. What will the Fed stance be then? What should they do to combat it? And what will they ultimately do? That's a loaded question.
Um,
Inflation. So would you even consider the current figures we're being given as raging inflation? I don't see it be. I mean, it's problematic numerically speaking, but I don't think it's nowhere near as bad as what is actually going to end up in the next couple of
yeah,
months and years.
yeah, it's getting worrying,
It's
7%.
concerning, yeah,
Yeah,
but not
concerning.
raging
Uh,
and definitely going
yeah,
higher.
it hasn't raged yet, and, by the feds, I guess he means the central bank and the treasury and the government.
Yeah.
I think one thing they're gonna do, they're gonna try as hard as possible to make that number look lower. They'll
Hmm.
tinker with the, composition of the CPI,
Yeah.
uh, owner-occupied rentals, they might make that a bigger part of it and keep it really low.
Yeah.
Um, what else could they do? I think they will probably do stuff that will make it worse. And
Hmm.
what would that be? More fiscal spending, because politically, with the midterms coming up, they're gonna want to seem to be helping people. But
Hmm.
when you help, the government helps people. They're actually not helping people. They're like, uh, they're gonna inflate more to
Right,
help
right.
a group of people. I mean, there's not really much they can do if they really want to stop the inflation. And they're the feds create the inflation. They have to first, the government has to uh, spend less than they take in taxes. So you get,
Hmm.
or even more, you got to build a surplus to pay down the debt. The
Yeah.
Federal Reserve has to raise rates to at least 8, 9, 10%. So you can, but that's not going to happen. So
Right,
there is no solution. And
right.
yeah, they can talk all they want that they're going to be hawkish. They're going to raise 4 times, and you're going to get Jamie Dimon helping out, but he's
Hmm.
part of the club.
Right. And everybody that's tuned into this, particular show right here, that it's too late. You know that we're experiencing all these events now because the monetary structure is reached its end. And one of the things that so I was thinking about this the other day. The whole banking model is predicated upon fractional reserve lending, and we witness, the slowdown of lending because commercial banks no longer really need borrowers the way that it has needed them in the past to pump up and inflate the monetary base and everything like that. And so now that they're flush with cash with this whole, repo situation, I think it's easier now to begin the transition because the banks are, of course, those fake audits or whatnot say that they're stable, they're able to handle withstand and market corrections, which we all know is not the case. But all
Yeah.
that extra, trillions of funds just sitting in those repo accounts or whatever that the banks have, I think they're going to use that as a initial cushion for the market blow that's coming to buy the banking sector some time while they deal with the transition of the monetary system and all the other financial markets and stuff like that. And so I think that there's no way out. They know that. And now they're trying to navigate the correction or the crash as smoothly as possible on them, knowing that it's going to cause the average
Mm.
investor a lot of problems. But it's too late, and I think they're literally
Yeah.
trying to bring this thing down because they know they can't accomplish
Uh,
everything they're trying to do
yeah.
within 90 days. You know what I'm saying? Like 90
And
days to
yeah,
get this done. Come on now.
what you said there about the monetary system, fractional reserve lending, the other thing that's happening now, we've come to a point where the marginal utility of every dollar
Hmm.
spent into circulation or borrowed into circulation,
Hmm.
you need a lot more to create
Yeah.
$1 of wealth. You need like seven now or something or
Right.
more. And in the old days, you could create $1 in debt and it would create two or three in real wealth, and that's gone. And
Right.
that's because there's so much debt in the system.
Right.
And some people think that a lot of that reverse repo money could start flowing back into the banks.
Hmm.
And then the banks will lend even more, and it could create even more inflation unless the Federal Reserve raises the reverse repo rate to
Yeah.
match the rates that they raise. The banks are going to take it out from the repo market and maybe lend it to the public. Who knows?
Yeah, we will see. So let's answer this here. As always, for those that are tuning in, feel free to thought, a question, or whatnot. We'll chime our 2 cents on it, try to make sense of everything. But Miles says a layaway down payment on my ranch. So 90 days to pay it off. What assets would you guys want to own after the transition? Whoo, great question. What assets? Anything that would lessen my dependency upon this just-in-time system that's been built around us. So, like yesterday, I was ranting a little bit, and somebody called in about having bought a certain amount of acres in a different country, and got some cattle, some sheep, planting trees. The self-sustainability route is something that I really want to look into. So, if there's opportunity, definitely get out of the city into the countryside, learning how to become more of a individual that can use my hands to grow and sustain myself is something that I would like to look into now if I could, but definitely in the future if it's a possibility. So that's kind of me, man. I want real stuff that I can feel and dial back off the digital technology
Yeah.
stuff a little bit.
I mean, I'm just trying to stay independent,
Mhm.
self-sufficient. Uh,
Yeah.
I'm not really looking at buying a hobby farm or
Mhm.
doing that kind of stuff because it's not something I'm familiar with, and
Right.
at my age, I think it's better for me to focus on other things.
Mhm.
But I don't know what kind of transition there will be,
Right.
but it won't be a good one. And I think, as I've said before, if you have some also tangible assets, uh, if you are able to be in the countryside, that's great. But
Mhm.
also having a community of people that think like you, like-minded people, that you can help each other. I think
Mhm.
that's important. And also having stacking as well, physical silver and gold if possible. Uh,
Yeah.
and not have to spend it until after the whole thing implodes and you get a new when and all other assets that have been so overvalued for so long when they collapse, and
Yeah.
then you're able to pick them up for pennies on the dollar, pretty a lot like the globalists do, the elites.
Yeah.
uh, I'm not saying we have to be like them spiritually, but we can, uh, you know, um, I think Pastor Lindsey Williams said that
Mhm.
the elite, their currency, their money is gold. So,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
silver
And
as well, I guess.
yeah. And so speaking of which, this is a little backtrack, but something came to mind as we were talking, and I wanted to pull up briefly a article from Edward Von Grayers. Grayers, yeah, Grayers. I'm saying it correctly. Coming market madness could take 70 years to recover. And this is him using some excerpts from Ray Dalio's, I guess, most recent book or talk or whatever. But he's just highlighting some of the primary issues that we're facing, and just this little summary here of 3 quadrillion worth of problems out here that exists, just highlighting how
Quadrillion.
it's completely unsolvable. There's no way it can be paid back. And he talked about how it's compound since the great financial crisis. I went from 120 trillion up to 300 trillion as of now, equating to that quadrillion. Then we got the derivatives, which is 2+ quadrillion, unfunded liabilities, 500 trillion. And so he's like, since then, Nasdaq is up 16% or 16 times, SP up seven times, Dow up 6 times, Tesla up 352, Apple up 62 times. So it's like stuff is completely out of whack. And he was talking
Yeah,
about,
I was thinking today actually
uh-huh,
because I think Apple may be worth a little less now because the Nasdaq is corrected, but it became the first $3 trillion company.
yeah,
And I was wondering, the Fed must be worried about that because the Fed is supposed to be the biggest corporation. Some people think it's a government entity,
yeah,
and their balance sheet is only worth about 9 trillion now.
hmm
So uh, they're probably a little bit concerned that another company is competing with them, Apple.
yeah. And the last point on this article here is that his point is that based upon, he said the epic bubble might not recover until 2090. And he was referring to how prior to the Great Depression, as far as the real returns on the equity markets, it wasn't up until 2000 where people really started to see some real returns. And then factor in what's coming with this next crash, you're saying it's not until 2090 if history was to repeat itself. And so the reason I mentioned that is because the person talked about a transition. I'm thinking like it's going to be a long, drawn out
Yeah, that's
situation.
I mean, and I guess he could be right. I don't know. I haven't read the article, but yeah, 90 years. That's a long time. We'll be Mike and Mario show. I think we'll be gone by then.
Grandkids carrying something on it if it's possible. Oh man, but no, these are it's interesting times, man. But we all know what's going on. The Fed can't control things. It just blows my mind that they're trying to, keep that narrative that they can, solve this inflation issue. And they're talking about, a couple quarter rate hikes here and there. That's well beneath the stated rate of inflation, which itself is still negative. We're still negative 6.92. I saw something like that out current rates on. So Barlight Broker says for your gold chain, Mike. So Barlight Broker, he's a gold bug, and he obviously loves his jewelry because he's been wanting me to get a gold chain forever. And I actually have one. I wore it one time, and I think it caught people by surprise. Oh man. But anyway, feel free to throw out some last minute thoughts, man. And also, what's coming up in the future? What are we looking forward to in the future? What's coming that you're aware of that's worth keeping an eye on as well, Mario? Anything?
Well, in terms of data, there isn't, all the big data for the economy came out in the first
Hmm.
2 weeks. Um, I don't see much coming out in the next few weeks, but uh, I think we need to keep an eye on in this COVID situation,
Yeah,
whether this is unraveling. It would be quite interesting, and maybe if they are losing control of this, we should maybe be aware that they could bring some kind of false flag cyber event and stuff.
Also,
And they're pushing a lot of this Russia narrative.
mhm. Yeah,
They could bring some kind of we could have some kind of conflict
yeah,
with Russia. And I guess there's always the Fed meeting. I think the Fed meeting is towards the end of the month. I'm not
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
People are always looking at that, and maybe also keep an eye on the Fed's balance sheet,
Hmm.
to see if they're really tapering. I don't think they are tapering as much as they said, but yeah, January 25th, 26th is the next Fed meeting, but I
Yeah.
don't think it will be that important. I think people are expecting a rate hike already in March, which I think is yeah,
Uh,
it's quite
and
soon.
I think the bankers, I mean, the banker, like I mentioned about Jamie Dimon talking about the possibility of more than four hikes, and
Mm.
even some former Fed, some former Fed employees also talking about, as soon as March. It's like, they're trying to really hype this stuff up as a way that they're going
Yeah,
to try to
the
soften
bankers,
things.
if they're able to keep the markets from collapsing, it's
Hmm.
pretty good for bankers to have higher rates,
Yeah,
especially the longer term. We've seen the 10-year yield rise a lot because they can borrow very cheaply short term from the Fed and then lend at a higher rate, so their profits will improve. The
yeah,
trick is keeping the whole system together without collapsing it.
right.
I think they're too optimistic and they've got their heads in the sand because they're talking about doing it a lot quicker than they did, like from 2015 to 2018. It took them
Hmm.
years to unwind the great financial crisis liquidity injection through QE and zero
Yeah,
rates. And here they're talking about unwinding all this crazy QE or QE stimulus
yeah.
only 2 years after the crisis, which seems a little bit
Soon, extremely soon,
soon. Yeah.
abnormally soon. So here's another thing I think is worth mentioning. Somebody just mentioned that about 5G. So here in the U.S., starting next week, they're cutting on or activating or something with some 5G, which I thought things were already on, but it looks like they're going to be ramping things up. And of course,
Yeah.
nobody knows how that 5G technology, the frequencies will impact the human body in general. Nevertheless, those that have participated in what might be in those vials that went into the bodies. So I think this could, the Omicron, this could really ramp up the cases, like things are really out of control. And then also the Build Back Better bill still stalled because there's so much chaos in DC right now over, whether or not they're going to get those extra bills passed in time, as well as the voting rights that they're trying to push through. Because I saw something about they're trying to use a NASA bill, and they jammed in all types of voting registration stuff for anybody. They don't want no restrictions. They want the states no longer to control the voting rights or whatnot, all in preparation for November. So, Keenan, I saw your question, man. I appreciate you. It says, can you point me to a video that links the U.S. pensions to the emerging market funds that most certainly hold defaulting Chinese CP bonds? Point you to a video. Ah, man.
What what are C what are CP bonds?
That I am not familiar with. I guess
Yeah. You mean
Chinese bond.
realist?
So first thing that came to my
Uh,
mind is this is anything referring to that whole Evergrande situation.
oh, is that
Uh,
Evergrande?
I don't know,
Well,
but
I don't think there's too much holding, the foreign bonds.
mhm,
There's emerging market funds. I don't know if there's a video about it, but
yeah,
I would look into prospectus of emerging market funds and
yeah,
then go through what they're holding. emerging market bond funds, go through their prospectus and they will tell you if they hold the bonds. But I'd never heard of CP bonds. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, I just typed in CP bonds, and this is what came up, or prospects for Chinese corporate bond market.
Corporate bonds. Oh, corporate bonds. Okay, corporate bonds. Chinese corporate bonds.
So
Yeah, I
assuming,
think it's significant, but it's not something that is gonna. It could have an impact on investors, but a
yeah,
lot of the emerging market funds, they will hold different bonds from different countries.
mhm,
And let's say the Chinese corporate bonds will be maybe 3% of all the holdings. So even if they all collapsed, it would affect maybe, bring the value down by 3%.
yeah,
So I don't think it's not saying it's not risky, but don't think it's as serious as people think.
yeah. But Keenan, great question, man. So that's something I'll
Yeah.
definitely look into because I'm not familiar with it at all. So let me see. Somebody say BlackRock out there saying going to be years before any kind of recovery. That doesn't mean for all of us if we pay our cards and get some knowledge. 100%, 100% corporate paper. You talk about Keenan said the corporate paper.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's it boils down to what it's denominated in because I think
I
the dollar
I think
denominated stuff
if
is
you
the biggest
go
problem.
there's a guy, I've interviewed him and I've been interviewed by him, Jack Gamble. He's
Mhm,
got Nobody Special Finance. He covers a lot of what's going on in China. You might
mhm.
want to look at that channel. Is that Keenan who asked that? Or
Yeah,
yeah,
yep,
so
that was
yeah,
him.
Nobody Special Finance
Okay,
YouTube
so
channel.
any of them mixed up in funds that gave the U.S. pension funds great returns. So I'm assuming ultimately he's trying to figure out if there's been any U.S. pension funds that we're aware of or familiar with that probably purchased any of that corporate paper, Chinese Evergrande type stuff. And so I don't know. I don't dive too deep into the holdings of
Yeah.
the pension funds, other than knowing about the really large hedge funds. I think and some banks actually bought some
Yeah.
of that Evergrande stuff. But other than that, that's all I know. So I don't. But we all know the pension funds have been doing extremely risky things in order to get returns. So I wouldn't be surprised if somebody was
Yeah.
encouraged to go out and buy
What I would say is
risky
that
stuff.
a lot of times they're diversified, so they might lose all their money in the Chinese Evergrande, but
Yeah,
that will still that fund, unless it's just a Evergrande fund,
yeah,
then I don't think it's a problem. But
yeah. So it looks like Mario Keenan said he asked him yesterday, and then he said
oh,
ask
Jack Campbell.
Mario. So that's something obviously I guess everybody needs to dive into.
I haven't really been following too closely. I do Evergrande. I think he follows more than I do. The thing is, Evergrande, for now, it doesn't seem to have created any problems, or maybe it has, and we don't know about it. Maybe
Yeah.
that's why the stock markets haven't had a great start to the year. Maybe
Hmm.
that's why the bond markets are falling as well. Maybe
Yeah.
we hear maybe from, I don't watch CNBC, but the bankers in CNBC are probably saying, "Oh, the stock markets are down a little bit, but the bond markets yields are up because the economy is picking up again."
Yeah.
That's
We're
what they'll
recovering.
say. So we don't really know because these people are not too transparent.
Right. We know they lie. That's their primary objective, to keep their jobs.
Mm.
All right. Well, let's get ready to dial back, man. As always, hopefully this was it's well packed live stream here. Appreciate all the feedback and thoughts and questions. But yet we know there's something happening behind the scenes, and the best thing you can do is to question everything, educate yourself further, prepare as best you can, whatever that means to you. Stay prayed up and get your weight up. I mean, that's ultimately the simple formula, man. And find ways to enjoy these times because it's the beginning of the year. 2022 can be a great year depending on the viewpoint you have and the approach you take. So that's just my little 2 cents there. But any last thoughts, Mr. Mario, before we dial back?
Yeah, remain silent.
Miles Miles.
Remain silent. That's one thing I've learned over the last few weeks. If you live under a common law jurisdiction like we do in
Mhm,
England or even in the US,
mhm.
you don't have to say anything. So yeah, and don't go along with the globalists and
Yeah,
follow their. You don't have to follow their rules. You can just ignore it and.
yeah,
Yes, unfortunately, they've divided us. I've seen, a lot of people having a go at people who don't do certain things. But yeah, keep your head down. Uh, don't buy into the propaganda.
Mhm.
Keep the TV off as long as possible as well.
Very true. And here's a question from Miles that he mentioned that I didn't see it. Sorry. It says, do you think the U.S. will sell off states and monuments to pay off foreign debt? Ooh, I personally think that in promise to pay has already been handed to China as far as some of the like California. That's why I think they're trying to evacuate California somehow, some way, because it's rich in natural resources as well as the Grand Canyon area. I wouldn't be surprised if somehow, some way that land ends up in foreign
Yeah.
hands in a long term future. I don't know
Well,
how they gonna pull that off, but
the
what?
thing, it's not just the Chinese buying
Mhm.
US assets, because a lot of countries have a surplus of dollars, paper,
Yeah.
and you can't blame them for wanting something real. So
Mhm.
I'm not saying it's a good thing, but I think the Chinese already own like the big ports. Don't they own Long Beach port? They bought.
I think that was
I,
turned. I want to say that was rejected. I think, but it might have
I
went
don't
through on
know,
the
but
side.
I think they're heavily involved with the Panama Canal.
Mhm.
So I don't know if they're going to buy monuments, because monuments don't pay interest. They're
Right.
going to be buying businesses, land, farmland, and I think it's the same thing in Australia.
Yeah.
The Chinese have probably a big surplus of Aussie dollars, and
Yeah.
they're heavily involved there. But
Yeah.
that's what happens when a country has a trade surplus like China has. There's no point in holding the paper. They will want something real eventually.
Right. Something that helps them in their country, and they're what? How many ever was it? 1 billion plus people they have there, so they got a lot of
1.4
mouths to feed.
billion, and
A
they
lot of
know that
mouths
if
to
they
feed.
if they keep holding these Federal Reserve notes or U.S. Treasury bonds, in 5-10 years, it will be worth half of what it's worth now in purchasing power. So the
Yeah.
other thing, they're probably stockpiling a lot of natural resources as well.
Right.
That
Right. And I stay in them cornering the grain market, and so apparently they're hoarding, or they have been cornering the grain market for a reason, because they actually know that what's probably coming. So, but it is what it is. So anyway, appreciate everybody for hanging out with us. It's always good to connect with you guys. Definitely hit the thumbs up, share the video, and Manico64 on YouTube. Rethinking a Dollar wherever you find me. And other than that, be safe, be blessed, have a great weekend, and we'll see you guys next week. Peace.